I really want to encourage families to recognize that just because you make a mistake doesn't mean that the entire goal is lost. If you're at 4 hours a day of screen time, shoot for 2. And what you'll find, I think, particularly for children younger than 2, is they typically are able to find alternative ways of filling their time.
TV, smartphones, and tablets are part of our culture. However, that doesn't mean we should spend every waking minute staring at a screen. In fact, a child development specialist at Kansas State University says children and adults both benefit from limiting their screen time to just a few hours a day and establishing screen-free zones in the house. On today's Sound Living, the opportunity cost of screen time. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. K-State Research and Extension Child Development Specialist Bradford Wiles says screens are not the problem. They're just a tool that need to be used properly. Bradford, the recommendations for screen time are probably a lot less than most people would imagine. If you're under 2, no screen time, and above that, just 1 to 2 hours a day.
Yeah, that's correct. In the United States, we have a culture of screens being everywhere, and they're really convenient for parents to get some work done, right? A good distraction, and they demand attention from children. Yet what we know is that they're really not helpful at all for positive child development. They really are simply a mindless activity that doesn't grow their brains or their social emotional development or, physical development, all of these things. And so, yes, limiting screen time is a gigantic priority because of the opportunity cost. So if you're engaging in screen time, you're not doing things that can help you with skill building across multiple domains: physical, mental, social. The reason is that for children and adults to a certain extent, there are real opportunity costs, real giving up of activities that can help them grow and develop positively for that screen time.
One of the things I hear, though, is parents say, oh, but this is educational. They're learning how to do things by playing with my phone and playing with the laptop. How do we counteract that and make them see that it's really not as educational as they might think?
Yeah, I think the easiest way for parents to do that is to simply sit with them and then ask them about the information that they're seeing, and if they can recall that information and what that information means. One thing we've learned is that the educational component of the activities on the screen is the last thing that they learn. What they really learn how to do is manipulate the device. They're really good at navigating, opening different apps, and I'm talking about for younger kids, right? For kids ages 6 to 17, that's a little bit different, yet they're not typically engaging in educational opportunities on a screen. What experts view as educational and what we like to call educational are two wildly different things.
You touched on a couple of things there that I want to go back to. One of those is being engaged and watching together. That's a good start because then you know exactly what they're doing and maybe why they're doing it, why they're enjoying it. So that might be something that could be worked into playtime or other more fun activities.
Yeah, absolutely. So the screens are not the problem. The screens are a tool. The problem is when you use that tool to isolate, or the use of that tool isolates. If that tool is being used for engagement, yeah, great. I don't care what it is that you use to engage, but that's how children of all ages learn. It's through that dialogue, that discussion, that shared experience, that ability to talk about and discuss and learn with and from each other. That's really the benefit of human development, right? That's how we learn. We're social beings. So I would never discourage engagement around screens. Again, it could be engagement around an animal or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. It's a tool. And then, yes, that opportunity to really take a look at what children are learning if they're learning, what they're doing, and then really keeping track, too, of how much time. That time goes by very, very rapidly. An hour of screen time goes by, particularly for the viewer, very rapidly. And so it's helpful for adults to recognize how encompassing that time is. And if you can use that as opportunities for engagement, great. Typically, what we see is a screen as a babysitter or as a distraction from engaging with family. And that, of course, is not what we're after.
The other thing I think you were getting at is the fact that sometimes this is used in place of playtime, and we know how valuable play is for especially those 5 and under.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be very difficult for parents. One of the issues that we have is that we're drawn to screens. What happens with screens is, for young children especially, they will glance, but then they attend to. Because, of course, there's dynamic colors, there's movement, but it comes, again, at this opportunity cost of, so what could you be doing? And we know that children learn, particularly young children, about their worlds through play. Watching television is not play. It is the exact opposite of play. It is sitting, watching, and doing no talking, no movement, nothing. Let's just be clear. The benefit of screen time is to the parents. It's a deficit to children.
We talk about the fact that children like schedules, they like rules, but sometimes as parents, we don't always set the rules down when it comes to screen time, maybe because of the convenience factors you're talking about. What can we do then to kind of, I guess, either set the rules or maybe take a little bit more control of how this process plays out?
That's such a really, really important element of what we need to do. So the first thing is consistency. If adults are consistent in setting boundaries, things like screen-free zones. For example, no screens in your bedroom. Work to have no screens during family meals. It's very common for families to sit around the television, and it just really diminishes the quality and quantity of conversation. Essentially, people converse during commercials. So understanding that there are times and places and being very consistent in that will be extraordinarily helpful, not only to the adults, because they also need schedules and need to understand and have a chance to plan out what they need to do and then have that time to do it. It doesn't mean that you can't be flexible. One of the elements of consistency could be, for example, the amount of time. And it's good to have a schedule, yet sometimes we need to deviate from that. And as long as there's a schedule established, you can deviate from that and then go back and have no problem. The issue that we have is that if there's not a schedule established, then children aren't able to predict what's going to happen, and there's no going back to a solid routine. And that is really difficult for children to handle, and it causes consternation for both the child and the adult. The adult wants to be able to have their child occupied whenever they want, yet the child then is going to want to watch screens whenever they want, and it causes a real rift. And I want to say, I keep talking about one child. For many families, there are multiple children, and that can get really difficult for an adult because they're all asking to watch TV or to be on their tablets or whatever that is. And let's be frank, it's really easy to say yes. Again, screens benefit parents. And so it's really incumbent upon us as adults to recognize the role we have in their screen time and to provide them with opportunities to do better. So if you've got 4 kids, there are multiple opportunities for them to play together. Your youngest child is going to learn from the oldest and the ones in between. Again, those are the opportunities for adults to recognize their role in the screen time that their children engage in. I mean, let's be clear. Children don't watch screens unless they get permission. Or if they don't have to specifically ask, there's a tacit, there's an implied permission unless you say, don't get on the TV or the tablet or computer or whatever the screen is. And so recognizing that you are, as a parent, in control of that, and putting their interests above yours is the most important. Their interest, they don't know their interest. Their interest is watching the screen, but their real interest is growing and learning and being able to be competent with other people, being able to regulate their emotions and problem solve together. And you don't get that from being on a screen.
But we've also got to be careful that we're not sending the mixed message, right? Especially if we're in the screen-free zone. We can't be on our device if they can't.
That is absolutely right. And one of the hardest things as adults in the modern era is our phones are with us all the time. And we have to model proper screen time. We have to be able to not only enforce our rules, but be part of those as well. If it's time to be off our screens, we can't realistically be on them and expect our children to be okay with that. You know, adults in the U.S. watch somewhere between 6 and 8 hours of TV a day. And so part of making sure that we're raising children in a way that incorporates screen time that's not detrimental includes adults, at the very least, not engaging in screen time while their children are around and or awake.
And for those who are thinking, gosh, we got to cut back on our screen time, we got to do it as fast as we can, you want to caution them to not go cold turkey. This is just like anything, it's got to be done kind of gradually, slowly over time.
Yeah, and so for example, we have Screen-Free Week coming up. It's a tremendous thing if you're ready to do that. A few things that I would explain. The first is we need to prepare everyone for that. You don't want to spring Screen-Free Week on your children. The second thing is, and we know this through research, we don't want to set the goal of a screen-free week, and then if you make it one day and then the next day you essentially fall off the horse, you allow yourself or your children or everyone to engage in some screen time, that doesn't mean you failed. It means that you have another opportunity to succeed. And I really want to encourage families to recognize that just because you make a mistake doesn't mean that the entire goal is lost. We would much rather achieve 90% of our goal than 5. So if you need to taper down, great. You know, if you're at 4 hours a day of screen time, shoot for 2. And at 2, if it's within the recommendations, great. Then 2 is fine, you know, if they're 6 to 17. If they're younger than 2 and they're watching 4 hours, which is not unheard of, just cut it down, taper it down. And what you'll find, I think, particularly for children younger than 2, is they typically are able to find alternative ways of filling their time. Sometimes that way is to come into mom or dad or a grandfather or whoever's in the household and ask them to play. And really, if you're able, it's a really good thing to do. What I would encourage adults the most to do is to try to incorporate them into whatever it is you're doing, right? So oftentimes we turn on screens when we want to cook. Well, even your 2-year-old can do some things. Is it going to take you longer to cook? Of course. Is it really beneficial for your child? Absolutely. So not only are they engaging with you, but they're learning about all the things that go into making a meal, which include things like the difference between liquids and solids, you know, mixing things together, different colors, you know, all of the things that you can teach and learn about with your child. And yeah, it takes longer, but boy, that investment is so worth it. Children really learn, and it builds that relationship, that connection, and there's nothing more powerful than that.
That's K-State Research and Extension Child Development Specialist Bradford Wiles. A publication that he has written on the benefits of reducing screen time can be found online at the Extension Bookstore or at any county or district extension office. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.